It's a very important message. People don't realize it. They really don't realize their beefsteak also come from plants.
Yeah, right.
And I always love to remind them, no grass, no cow, no beefsteak. It's a simple math.
No, yeah.
Hello and welcome to That's Wild, a podcast series brought to you by the National Parks Board. I'm Elliot and I'll be your host for this series, where we'll be talking to special guests from the nature community about topics surrounding biodiversity conservation in our city and nature. Today's episode is all about plants. They're one of the most essential parts of human life, even though most of us may not fully realize this. And beyond nourishing our bodies, plants are also deeply intertwined with our cultural roots and heritage, and they make up a huge part of what we eat each day. So today we have Jana and Malcolm here to talk to us about the wonderful world of plants and how we use them in our, cuisines and our daily lives. So guys, would you please introduce yourselves?
Hello everyone, I'm Jana. I work as a herbarium keeper and principal researcher at Singapore Botanic Gardens, and the plant group which is love of my life are gingers. So I have spent my life researching gingers.
So hi everyone, I'm Malcolm and I am the chef and co-owner of two restaurants, Candlenut and Pangium. At Candlenut, we kind of focus on family Peranakan stories and dishes, and Pangium is where we kind of take that further while exploring regional heritage, culture, as well as recipes and lost ingredients.
Right, so I thought we'd just open up with a very casual and open question. So what do you guys like about plants? What got you into plants, or what got you into using plants in food?
What got me in the plants, I was born loving plants. So my parents say, at 3 years old, I was already plucking plants here and there. And for me, the very clear memory is when I was about 10 years old, and we would go for a school trip to the glass houses in Prague, which is the capital city of the country I come from. And there we went into the tropical glass houses. And I was completely smitten by gingers at that point.
Right.
So yeah, that's where my passion for ginger started.
Naturally, right, when you deal with food, you're using plants, but what deepened your interest in using different types of plants for your dishes?
Yeah, my very earliest memory of plants is really from my mom. It's not because I love plants in the first place, but I see her, she spent all her free time planting plants, going to the nursery, repotting plants, shifting things all over the house. And sometimes we struggle to find our door to go inside the house, right? Because it's just filled through to the corridor. And sometimes she plants those edible plants like chilies or lime, and that's where I got a bit more interested. It's like, we can actually eat this. And then from there, of course, plants being used in all sorts of Peranakan cuisine, and that kind of start that fascination, like how can just shallots, garlic, chilies, and lemongrass, when you grind them together, it looks like just plants, right? But then somehow the smell and the aroma that just permeates the kitchen to the room to the corridor, and that was alluring. So that's how I kind of really got more and more interested in them.
Right. And I think you guys mentioned gingers and you mentioned aromatics. Maybe we could highlight a few of these plants that are very special to you guys and that you guys study or use a lot in your daily lives. What are some examples of these really important plant species to our cuisine, to heritage, to research?
Well, for me, right, kind of story is, we always travel, and there is something we always miss, when we go to different places, especially to Western countries, and that is chilies. We need that kind of heat and spice, and then that's where I realized that we grow up with so much of it, but it's so integral into our, not just in our palate, but kind of that spice invigorates us, I think sometimes we are a little bit kind of crazy that way, right? Our weather is so hot, so humid, and we still want to add more heat to our bodies. But I think that's really something I feel is really indispensable, when we make sambals or curries, even just adding sliced chili padi to noodles and rice. We just love it.
Oh, I think for me, when it comes to food, if you ask me what my favorite ginger is, it has to be a torch ginger.
Right.
That is really like a secret ingredient of Peranakan cooking. That flavor is just amazing. It is very hard to describe, but it's quite amazing. There is a little bit of ginger, there is a little bit of lemongrass, then there is something what nothing else has, just the torch ginger. So I really love any dishes with that. But of course, when it comes to my professional life studying gingers, so the two genera I study the most It's the genus curcuma, which is the genus where turmeric comes from, and the genus gingiber. That's where our common Halia ginger comes from. So those are very special genera for me. They are very large. They are taxonomically very complex. So we always like discovering still new species to science. And for the ginger, we have discovered a new ginger species from Singapore.
Right. Before we go into all these new discoveries, could we describe the torch ginger a bit more? Like what dishes are they used in and what the ginger itself kind of looks like? I guess it looks like a torch, right? Because it's called torch ginger.
Yes, the inflorescence, it's like a torch, but actually by the time it reaches the stage of the torch, by then it's already inedible. So the torch ginger, you have to harvest when it's really young. It actually looks like a spear. You can see them on the local markets. They are kind of like spindle-shaped flower buds in pink color. And they are usually used fresh, so you shave them into a very, very thin slices, and then you add them as a garnish. So for me, I'm totally addicted to Chinese rojak.
Right,
So I mean, like if there is no torch ginger, don't even bother. If you come to a rojak stall and there is not enough of torch ginger, locally known as kantan, don't buy.
Right.
Some cultures, they also use the leaves.
Right.
And what people do not know, the fruits of torch gingers are very nice to eat. So many local people in Peninsular Malaysia, in Borneo, and other parts of Southeast Asia, they actually harvest the fruits and they eat the seeds. Now, the seeds are spicy, but they are embedded in the juicy, sweet and sour, what we call botanically aril. So it's something like when you have a passion fruit. You have the seed inside, and that seed, it's in the juicy, sweet sac. So the torch ginger has similar thing.
Okay.
It's just that it's not yellow but white, but it's still sweet and juicy.
Right.
So I'm already learning something new today, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
and
learning
it's
things all the
something
time.
that I really look forward to because we really do use quite a lot of this, the torch ginger flower, even really the rojak, right? Like Jana mentioned, you just have to have it in that Chinese rojak until people call it a rojak flower sometimes, right?
Yeah.
That's how important it is. And really many users for even our kind of cuisine, like shaving it finely to garnish on salads like, karabus. And we even use it to infuse into like asam pedas. So that gives it a very nice citrusy, aromatic flavor profile. Like yesterday, we tried a kind of a gado salad. Yeah, and then we mix a lot inside. It meshed so well with that kind of peanut sauce,
Right.
Yeah, I was like telling my chef, it seems like too much, but somehow it just balances the whole thing because it can be quite rich, but it's amazing. So we really use a lot of this, and it's really true that when you get the fresh one, it's totally different from the sad-looking one. The moment you slice it, you can see already, it makes a lot of difference. And when we garnish or put inside nasi ulam, that kind of herb rice salad, wow, I tell you, it's really, really one of the best things you will have, Yeah.
Now I will let go of one of my alcohol secrets here. You can actually slice the torch ginger and you can macerate it in vodka or in any other neutral tasting alcohol, and you can get a pretty decent flavor for your drinks.
I have to try
And then
that.
you can use those drinks in some kind of like cocktails. Right? You can get that little flavor. Or if you want the child-friendly version, you can also actually boil or kind of make a drink like a syrup flavored with torch ginger. There is so many uses.
Yeah, speaking of which, this also you can use for dessert kind of components, like infusions.
Yeah.
You can make a very light kind of sorbet with it. But one we did before, now I remembered. So we slice it very thinly and we candied it, and you serve it on top of, you can do like suji cakes and stuff like that. It's amazing because that kind of flavor that comes through with the butteriness of the cake is nice.
Let's talk about all the other types of gingers that you guys use, in Peranakan cuisine or maybe in any other cuisine, right? I mean, we have the torch ginger, but what are some other gingers that we use? It's not just, your halia, right? What do we even call it? Common ginger?
Yeah, common ginger would be halia. I mean, obviously, what is very important one is galangal, also known as greater galangal. And that one is really fairly large rhizome, which is pinkish in flower. And locally, it is sold as blue ginger. There is nothing really blue. I understand that came from some misunderstanding of being it called southern ginger, which is supposed to be non-ginger, but that it actually can also mean a blue ginger. But it's really a key ingredient for rendang and many other like meaty, rich curries. So that one is very important. And then, of course, turmeric. You cannot imagine Asian cuisine without a turmeric. And it's not only Peranakan cuisine, but Indian cuisine, Malay cuisine. I mean, like, life in Asia cannot happen without turmeric. Many people don't know that turmeric, it's a ginger. And then the last one, very common one, it's cardamom. And in cardamom, we use seeds, right?
Yeah.
Again, plenty of people do not know that cardamom is a ginger.
I didn't know that, yeah.
But there are locally many, many more. If you go to Tekka market, sand ginger, then the ginger which is called Chinese keys, which especially Thais, they use it for tom kha kai and for some other dishes. There is very many gingers in the market.
And I guess in your cooking, Chef Malcolm,
Yes,
what
yeah.
other gingers do you use?
Yes, I mean, everything that Jana mentioned, we really use quite a lot of it. Actually, when we kind of interview a new cook or chef to join in, we will say, get ready because your knives will be very dull. You'll be kind of slicing a lot of galangao, turmeric, and all these kind of gingers. And this all, like rendangs and all that, they do add a very distinctive note and complexity to the dish. It really depends, and you cannot overuse it also. It can even be bitter or unbalanced. And even talking about like sand ginger and stuff, this is something new we also kind of discovered. We were trying to research and pinpoint the flavor. It's only this kind of ginger can give you that very distinct flavor profile, and that makes like what we do now a peanut sauce. It transforms it to another level of flavor. And so over the years, we've kind of used a lot, but we are still learning even more deeply about the types of ginger and how can we use them even more extensively.
Could we talk a bit more about the sand ginger? So that's something that I'm not too familiar with, but I've heard it's been used in gado-gado. Is that correct? Or is it used for other kinds of dishes?
Yeah, so this was interesting because we are kind of doing a research on this gado-gado sauce, right? So me and my chefs, we were looking at it and we were all trying to say, what is this flavor profile? We're trying to recreate this, and we were looking at recipes and asking around, and then we went around everywhere trying to taste different herbs and spices, but we just can't unlock this, right? So, my R&D chef, he went to Geylang Serai market, and he literally went to each store to ask the aunties, right, what is this thing that gives it the flavor? And then she recommended, she said, you have to use this sand ginger. And it was like, all of us like unlock, why didn't we know about this? Why did we miss it out? And so now actually it's going on our menu next week, so that's how much we love it.
What's the taste profile like for the sand? Is it hard to? I know it's hard to explain for these gingers, but how does that differ from, maybe the torch ginger or your common ginger?
Wow.
Tough question.
It is a tough question because I will throw in a scientific fact, and that is that each of the ginger species have their flavor compounded by, on average, 4,000 aromatic compounds. Just digest that. And we have about 1,500 species of gingers, and every of those species have that composition constructed differently.
Right.
So we are talking really about very complex things here. But to rescue Malcolm a little bit, from the point of a botanist, I use smell a lot when I try to differentiate the gingers in the field. I would say like torch ginger, you can still feel a bit more of a fruitiness, while I would say the sand ginger is more spicy and earthy. You don't have that much of that fruity lightness. It gives you that kind of like a grounding,
like a
warm, spicy feeling.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
What do
maybe
you think?
almost a slight medicinal
Yes.
component,
Yeah,
so
there
it's
is a herbal component to it.
yeah. So it's not your usual spicy kind of ginger. It's just very deep, slightly herbal. Yeah, herbal is the word.
Right.
Kind of flavor profile, and that is very different from the rest.
Gingers are masters of disguise because, you can have your ginger flavor, but there are species which, if I would give a blind test to Malcolm, I'm sure he would say, oh, this is lemongrass, 100%. And it's a ginger. Ooh. And then I also have a ginger, which we described not too long ago from Vietnam as a new species, which smells and tastes exactly like a cinnamon. Like 100% cinnamon. And, when the analysis are done, that cinnamon compound will be there. So that's how versatile gingers are. There are also some gingers which actually smell pretty bad. If you crush them, they smell like bedbugs. Oh. Right? And that smell may not be pleasant for humans, but actually when you dilute it enough, then again it may become pleasant. So it's a whole scent and aromatic compound world, which is quite amazing for this plant group.
Right. And you mentioned 4,000 aromatic
Compounds in each.
Right.
Of course, there are always 2 or 3 or 5 which are the major ones,
Right.
and then there is plenty of those which are there in a little bit amount, but it all works as a complex. And I think that's where also the way you prepare these things matters a lot, because these compounds, they do engage in chemical reaction.
Right.
And I'm sure Malcolm can tell you that throwing a ginger into the blender and submitting it to heat as opposed to knife cutting and processing it the traditional way, it can completely tweak your flavor.
It's true. I mean, it comes down to even the ginger itself, the fibers, right? And because the way you kind of cut them, it releases different kinds of flavor profile, even textures also. And all this, it may seem very minute, but every little bit contributes to the final product, right, of the dish. And we try many ways, when we want a certain result. And, in restaurants, sometimes you are tight for time, right? And cutting requires a lot of patience and a lot of time. But we just cannot take the shortcut. We just cannot blend it. You just got to cut it in a certain way to get that result.
I mean, you guys are talking about a lot of different types of gingers and a lot of different types of taste profiles. How hard is it to identify the right ginger to use in your dishes? Is that something that requires a lot of training, a lot of experience? For our wet markets, there's a lot of different local names. So do local names kind of help with that, or do they actually make things a bit more confusing?
Okay, from the botanical point of view, the common names can be very confusing because a single common names, it's often applied to 3, 4, 5, but sometimes even 10 different species. So a good example of that is turmeric. When you go on local markets, any rhizome which is like decently bright yellow-orange inside and smells somewhat like a turmeric is basically labeled as such. But from a botanical point of view, if you take these rhizomes and you grow them in the pots, 2 years later, you will get maybe 10 different flowers or 5 different flowers. So that's sometimes like why people say, oh, turmeric from this region, it's like more spicy and less spicy. But actually, sometimes people are actually using different species.
Wow.
So that's how taxonomy is important to Malcolm's work.
Right.
Yes, along the years, we do realize, you start out learning from even homes, right? It's just turmeric, right? And as we kind of go into restaurant and we get different suppliers, or we go to the markets and we're buying the turmeric, it doesn't give you the same result. And you realize, the region does play a part, the species does play a part. Every detail matters, right? I think this is a new kind of learning curve for us as chefs also, to go deeper into what we know. For many, we call old school, even Peranakans, right? They actually recognize by that kind of flavor profile. It's about palate training over the years sometimes, right? They may not know exactly the region, the names of it, but I think that's where that sensing of like, this is not the right one. I have to find this kind of flavor profile. Sometimes it takes years to kind of catch that, but that's why it makes it so special.
Yeah.
Even in the field, sometimes, I'm in the locality and the gingers are not flowering, and many of them look very, very similar in leaf. The leaves are same looking. When they flower, they look different, but flowers are not there. So I always crush the leaves. If they smell different, they are different.
Right.
Trust your nose.
Right.
Yeah. Not very scientific, because in the field you can't really quantify it. But whenever the 2 plants smell different, you can bet your socks on that.
Is that how you guys might have identified the new species that you guys discovered in Singapore, or did that just look different? You saw the flower?
Oh, that just looked different because Singapore is quite small. We knew exactly which kind of species were described from Singapore before. So when my colleague brought the first leaf into herbarium, I was like, I have never seen this from Singapore.
Okay.
There are some species in Peninsular Malaysia which look very, very similar. So we had to make sure it's not just a species which was already known from Peninsular Malaysia, which have turned up in Singapore, because that wouldn't be such a big deal. That happens far more frequently. But we did make sure that the species in Singapore is different, distinctly different from all others, and we described it as Singapore ginger.
It's only found here.
Which is only found here.
Right.
So until now, it has not been found 10 years later. There is no record of it from Indonesia, Peninsular Malaysia. And, that means the species is endemic to Singapore. And we have the responsibility to conserve it and protect it. Because if we don't, that species will be gone. And we have very few individuals, like 13 individuals in the wild. But of course, we have propagated a lot already behind the scenes.
Good to know. Going back to the question on the topic of ingredients, I know we're talking about a lot of different regional variations and all having a bit of a different taste profile. Has globalization changed how hard it is to procure certain ingredients, or how cuisine has evolved over the years? Have we started using certain ingredients that we didn't use in the past, and is it harder to find these more specific kind of gingers?
From personal experience, I have run the restaurant, for 15 years, and you do see differences from before to now in terms of what kind of the quality of ingredients or how is it changing. And then that makes sense because sometimes when my mom tells me that ingredients are not the same as before, right? Yeah, you can say even things like chilies. You just have to buy what is available, rather than what you have before, because it can come from anywhere now. It's about availability rather than specifically what do you really want or remember it to be, because that's what you kind of have access to. And with, like you mentioned, globalization is one, commercialization is another, where you have to make your products consistent in terms of look, size, quality, and sometimes this consistency takes away a lot of the uniqueness of ingredients. And we do see that happening now. As long people want that, it will continue to happen. Yeah, and we have to go and source very carefully with maybe small farmers, people who are genuinely interested to, grow this sort of plants, and they're quite rare. Let's put it this way, in Singapore.
So even in the wet markets, sometimes it's hard to find the gingers that you need for your dishes.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard. I mean, it's more of whether they can get it in, because they may not be the ones kind of growing them also, and you kind of need to build relationships sometimes, right? Because if they come in small quantities, then you kind of make sure that they remember you and want to keep them for you.
Yeah, I think the variety, even on the local market, it's slowly shrinking because it's just more convenient for people to get their shopping done only in the supermarket, right? But in the supermarket, when you go to the banana section, mostly you see just the Cavendish bananas. And if you go to the wet market, you can see 5 up to 10 different varieties, local varieties of bananas. And you get different tastes, the different colors, different sizes, really a wonderful variety. But if people stop patronizing the wet markets, we will lose all these heirloom and heritage varieties forever and ever. So the loss of these varieties is one thing. But second thing, it's running the risk that if we all rely on a single type of banana like Cavendish, virus may come and wipe them out. This happened in 1950s, where the world already lost one of the favorite banana varieties at that time, and Cavendish came in and took that place. But, it can happen again with Cavendish. And if we do not have all these local varieties, then we have no backup to fall on. The same goes for conservation of the wild species, because if we do not conserve the wild species, when something happened to our favorite globalized crop, we have nothing in our hands to rescue it with. If we still have the crop wild relatives, if we still have the other heirloom varieties, we can still do more crossing, we can breed more resistant varieties and things like that. So it's very important. So people, please do go to wet markets, because if you go to the wet markets and you support the farmers, they will still bring you all these wonderful different varieties. Make it a point, consume different kind of bananas, different kinds of gingers, because if you buy, people will bring it in.
That is true. It's not just supermarkets, because now it's so convenient to order online, right? And that's where people start not just to go to supermarket, you start to stay at home, and then nobody is at the wet markets.
Yeah.
Over time, yes, that's where, store owners say, we will stop bringing this in, we'll stop growing this because there's no demand for it. And at the same time, commercialization, selling loads of maybe Cavendish banana. It's true, you go there, it's endless, rows and rows. On the culinary side, it's such a waste to lose great tasting local style banana cakes, because if you use the Cavendish, you just can't get that same flavor. It's just different. And you lost not just the ingredient, but a part of our heritage as well.
Yeah, I guess to preserve our heritage, right, it's very important to know and distinguish the different types of plants that we use. And that's one reason why we need to conserve them. But any other reasons, so I'm directing more towards Jana, any other reasons why it's important to identify, study, and conserve all the plants that we have around us?
Well, the identification comes in a very simple thing. If you cannot identify a plant and give it a name so that we all refer to the potato as a potato and to a tomato as a tomato, then we cannot really speak. We need a common language. That's where the science come in. And the common names are not cutting it because one common name, many different plants. That's where the Latin names, the Esperanto of science comes in.
Yeah.
And also, how do we actually apply the plant names? That's very important. So who are the people who decide what are the plants' names? Those are the botanists. But who is the police behind who is safeguarding how the plant name is applied? And the answer to that is herbarium, right? Herbaria around the world, they store the correctly named plant samples, and those plant samples which have been named by scientists. So those are kind of like a benchmarks for how the plant name has to be applied. And so when somebody finds a plant without name, they go to the herbarium, they go to the botanists, they ask, hey, what is this plant? And we do compare them with these correctly named samples, and we arrive to the conclusion what that plant is. And now you may think how that actually relates to my daily life. And the answer to that is that many plants looks really quite similar, yet one can be deadly and one can be edible. And trust me, you want to know very sure which one is which one. So that's where the botany come in. And preserving all those plant collections in the herbarium is matter of life and death. So I always tell people, your life depends on herbarium.
Yeah.
And people like, what is herbarium? How can my life depends on something I don't even know about?
Welcome to Nature Nuggets. In the spirit of our podcast titled That's Wild, we wanted to ask our guests to recommend something wild that they've come across or enjoyed, and that you can check out yourself too. So Jana, what recommendation do you have for our audiences?
I would definitely recommend everyone to visit the ginger garden in the Singapore Botanic Gardens. It's a place where you can see over 550 species and varieties of gingers. And many people don't even know that bananas are related to gingers. They belong to the ginger order, Heliconias, and very many other interesting plants.
For me, I'll go the gastronomic route, right? And that's where if you have a chance to try somewhere in a restaurant or somebody's house, do try nasi ulam. I think this is really one of the really rare kind of dish because it just takes so much time to make it. I mean, in theory, it's not difficult. It's all the different fresh herbs that you can find, and you have to test your knife skills. So, the dish have many kind of commentary. It can be known as the queen of Peranakan rice salads. It symbolizes the epitome of Nyonya kind of knife skills and their attention to detail. And so this is something you should try because you can put many kinds of ingredients inside, different kinds of gingers. Even we do like with turmeric, any herbs you can find, laksa leaves, lemon basil, lime leaves, you name it, you just put it in and you just have this really amazing flavor profile of the region. So where you are from, they get the herbs from the region, that's what you're tasting.
Yes,
It sounds like a herbarium on the plate, and I'm definitely going to try it.
some things you can't get from a book or film. So please go out there and experience these things for yourselves. For now, we're going to jump back into the main segment of our podcast. So if you guys have seen our promo video, Jana went to Geylang Serai Market to look at the wide variety of gingers that they have there. And we have some of them here today with us. So Malcolm, you're holding on to a tiny ginger. It looks a lot tinier than the Galangao at least.
Yeah, it looks quite small. On just first glance, people might just think, hey, it might be a turmeric, right? When you look closer, when you kind of break it apart, you definitely can see it has a yellow, kind of light yellow interior, not your usual orange, and the smell is earthy somewhat. To me, it's just got this medicinal-ish kind of smell, which I think is really, really nice. You can't really pinpoint your finger on it, but it goes well with, for us, we do a spice paste with peanut to make a sauce out of it. And this one just transform it. It's kind of that secret ingredient, if you will say, right, that makes all the difference. And this is the sand ginger.
Apart from the gingers, we also have, these are also technically gingers also, right? Bananas.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have different kind of bananas which you usually do not get in your supermarkets. We have got red bananas which are originally from South India. The texture it's very different from Cavendish bananas. They are more slimy kind of thing, but it gives it like really nice feel. They are very sweet and really quite different. And the next kind of bananas we have, it's pisang nipa. And those you can recognize fairly easily because it's that kind of banana. If you cut them across, they are not round. They are really like rectangular. So I feel, especially coming from a European country where all you get are like Cavendish bananas, and then I came to Asia and it was like, oh my God, this one tastes a little bit like apricot, and this one tastes a little bit like apple, and this one tastes a little bit like with lemon, kind of that tangy kind of thing. I was completely smitten by bananas, and I don't buy Cavendish banana anymore.
For these bananas, right, are there any particular uses for them? I mean, you mentioned that, you can just eat them like that, right? These are
These ones are really like table dessert bananas, which we eat as a foods. But of course, there are many bananas which are used as staples. They are very starchy, so they are plantains.
Yeah.
Plantains are kind of bananas also. And so some of them are harvested while they are still green, and people just peel them and boil them. And basically, they are used like potatoes or like tapioca kind of thing, right? Then there are some of the plantains which are being fried. So you get kind of like a pisang goreng, but for our pisang goreng, we usually use
Sweet
pisang
one,
raja, the sweet one. The South Indian long plantains, which are inside slightly on the orange kind of color, when they fry them, they are also sweet.
And we can get those here.
We can get those here, but they are far less frequent than the red ones or than the pisang nipa or pisang mas or all the other kind of things. Again, Teka Market is a good choice, Gelang Serai, and occasionally other markets.
I'll look out for it. I wanted to actually explore the local names a bit more because I'm not very familiar with plants, but right now I'm working on a project at the wet markets with fish. So cataloging the different local names for fish. And what I've realized is that the local names for fish can be quite specific also, more specific than, let's say, the English names at the supermarket. So I was wondering whether they might not be as accurate as the scientific names, but do local names also, make distinctions between different species, more so than, I guess, the commercial names?
Common names can be sometimes very generic, but sometimes they can be more specific than scientific names.
Right.
And there have been examples where the local people can actually tell you, when the botanist visits, these two, we have two different names for them, and then the researchers will do all their studies with the molecular methods, and 6 months later they will actually verify that the locals were right, right?
Yeah.
So it goes both ways,
Yeah.
and especially orang aslis.
Yeah.
Listen to orang asli when you are in the jungle. They really know their stuff. But I think again, like the wet market's common name, like a turmeric or very widely used plants, by default, I am always very careful about those names because as people traveled around the world, sometimes they brought their turmeric with them, the true turmeric, but sometimes they didn't. And they found growing in that new place where they moved in something similar, also with orange rhizome. And hey, it still smells and tastes a little bit like turmeric, and they will still call it a turmeric. They would not invent a new name for it. Right? So that's how we end up with these most common essential things like turmeric, being applied to 10 different plant species depending where you are. If you are in Indonesia, if you are in Vietnam, if you are in India.
So interesting. And we were talking about, conserving these plants, right? And I guess today we're talking a lot about gingers. Besides going to the wet market and I guess using a wallet to kind of give that demand for a variety of gingers to be there, what are some other ways that we can conserve this wide variety of plant species around us?
I mean, being from the Botanic Gardens, of course, we focus a lot on the wild plant species. It's not so much about conserving edible varieties, but really what we call the crop wild relatives.
Yeah.
These are plants which are related to the plants we use. And so we do it by many different ways. We have species recovery program, so the plants which we feel are at risk of extinction, either regionally or even just for Singapore, we would try and rescue them by various methods. Mostly we would have them propagated. We, of course, always prefer the methods which preserve the genetic variation in plants, but sometimes all you have got left is one single plant, and that's where a tissue culturing will come in so that we at least make a plenty of material before we can even think further. So we do conserve in that way, but people don't realize that you can do any action for conservation only when you have baseline data in. And I go back to the naming plants. You need to know what the plant is called and where it is distributed.
Yeah.
And when does it flower and fruit, so that you can go and harvest seeds, and where you get all that information from the herbarium specimens, right? Because the herbarium specimens would have the records of specimens collected over the period of 200 years, let's say, and over the very wide geographical area. It gives you a larger picture. If you don't know what you have and where you have it, you cannot conserve it. So I always say herbarium and plant taxonomy, it's kind of like giving an alphabet to everyone else. The name is key to the knowledge. Of course, we also do really a practical on-the-ground conservation by slowly exchanging the ornamental species in our plantings all over Singapore, and we exchange them for the native species. So we are making our ecosystems, our greenery more resilient. That's what will make our city in nature happen.
Right. And Malcolm, how do you think this kind of translates into the kitchen? Like, how can chefs better use, I guess, taxonomy and scientific research to help them in the kitchen?
I think in the kitchen, right, we are very focused on just doing and preparing. And I heard this analogy someone gave to me before. We are like cavemen, right? We're just stuck in this kitchen and we just get very happy over fire and just cook. And I think sometimes when in the midst of like just preparing food and just slicing, chopping, grinding up all these gingers and vegetables and plants, we tend to forget that there is a bigger picture, like what Jana mentioned, right? And I think this is a very good reminder. In fact, recently for us, getting deeper into understanding turmeric is not just turmeric. There's many kinds, many regions, many usage. And I think this gives chefs, or at least our chefs now, a clearer idea. Food is really much more than just being a caveman. And in a bigger picture also, you want to share, or for us it's like, you preserve heritage per se, right? But the idea of it is still education. Without education, nothing can happen. It's just, you're just going to do, but you need to educate. And that's where, whether it's in combining wisdom of old nonyas and their palate, and you have to trust them. When they see, they taste, they know. Whether it's like a combination of professional cooking, where we kind of put it in terms of very structured way of producing food, and to experts on the taxonomy of it, everything comes together, and then you have this whole big picture.
And I realized I didn't ask this before, but I think it's a very important question. What do you think sets Peranakan cuisine apart from the rest? What makes it special? And is it tied to the use of different types of plants, and also following that, what are the commonly used plants aside from gingers that we've already discussed that are used in Peranakan cuisine?
So what makes Peranakans unique is also about the history of kind of where Peranakans came from, right? Especially this region where we are along the Straits of Malacca, Indonesia, and because on the trading routes, and different people come to all these parts to do trading. And I was saying, like, it's not like today where you can kind of fly in for a business meeting and get out that night, right? You kind of take ship here after a long journey, and you have to do your business here for a while. And that's where people start to, especially Peranakans, they intermarry, and that's where they bring along their cultures, their ingredients, their stories. And for Peranakans, we specifically, at least from my kind of heritage, is a Chinese Peranakan, right? And so regionally, you cook a lot of these curries using a lot of these local spices. But then the Chinese are like, we miss our soy sauce, we miss our pork, we miss our Chinese mushrooms, we miss our soybean paste. And this start to blend together slowly, right? And become what we call, of course, the Peranakan culture, but at the same table, like we call the tok panjang, right? It's interesting because you have kind of Malaysian, Indonesian style dishes, and then you have Chinese braised dishes or stir-fry dishes. And what is going on? Peranakans kind of embrace the idea of diversity, innovation, creativity, and then that translates to really the ingredients that we use. So even you can have Chinese style curries already, right? And they infuse a rempah into their curries. And through the years, I start to understand. Yeah, and shallots, garlic, chilies, different types of ginger, lemongrass, all this with herbs like lime leaves, torch ginger flower. It just create this new combination of flavors that are very unique to the Peranakan culture.
And your two restaurants are named Candlenut and Pangium. These are also plant species, and
Yes.
they're quite important to Peranakan cuisine.
Yes,
as well.
yes. Yeah. So I mean, for us, me and my mom, we were the ones who kind of started Candlenut, right? It was two of us in the kitchen. That's why I really say that the old kind of Nyonya flavor profiles are so important because they keep you grounded. Right? And my mom, never really run a restaurant before. I always say it's a question of whether we were brave or we were stupid, right? When we decided to start the restaurant. Yeah, and then it's like, okay, what name shall we do it? Shall we call it, Nyonya Kitchen or something? No, I said, let's call it an ingredient because we use so much of local ingredients, right? And it's like, yeah, but kind of lemongrass is very overused and of course, you have other restaurant names named after different herbs. And then it's like, we're quite unknown, right? So what unknown ingredients are there? And we realized candlenut was one of that kind of, nobody really understand. Is it candlenut? What is it? It's like a candle? Is it a nut? Is it a seed? And so we said, let's use this as our name. And plus, it sounds quite cool, So, and we started with Candlenut, and through the years, this is where kind of the idea of people don't understand even the local names of it, right? So many times people come to Candlenut and they introduce their guests. Oh, this is Candlenut. This is the Buah Keluar restaurant. Yeah, and it's like, but we can't really correct the guest, right? And say, no, you're wrong. It's not Buah Keluar, it's Buah Keras, right? Or Indonesia, they call kemiri. But that kind of stuck in my head and say, yeah, that's how the local ingredients are kind of lost really in terms of the knowledge of them. And when we were starting the second restaurant, me and my wife, we were thinking a few names and stuff. And it was like saying, you are doing a sister restaurant, right? So this is the best time, to clear the air up already. So if Candlenut, the local name, is called Buah Keras, then the new restaurant should be named Buah Keluar, right? And the English name of it, then it became Pangium. And that's really when people come to the new restaurant and they're like, oh, we never knew. And that's great because that's the whole idea of the restaurant, the whole idea of why we wanted to start it, our chefs, our team wanted to join us to discover whether it's from the story, heritage, and now the ingredients, right? Learning just, wow. And we're just happy that we are on this journey. Like I was telling many people and our guests, we have so much ingredients, so much story and dishes. I would say I will never be able to explore everything in my lifetime. It is a start of a work and it needs to be continued by the generations after.
I think that's a nice little wrap up to everything, really highlighting the importance of taxonomy in cuisine and the intersection of both, why they're important and how that can help preserve different species, but also why identification, scientific naming, as well as the local names, right, are very important to unlocking certain taste profiles in our food. So thank you, Jana and Malcolm, for joining us today. I hope you guys had fun talking about all the interesting questions and ideas that we've had on this podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of That's Wild. If you would like to hear more, please tune in for more episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you like our content, don't forget to show your support by hitting the follow button and giving us a 5-star rating. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.